Welcome to Women in Electronics, the only show that empowers, develops, advocates, and celebrates the accomplishments and advancement of women in the electronics industry. With your host, Jackie Maddox.
Well, hello, and here we are again today with the Women in Electronics radio program. Here talking with Bob Gourdeau, who's the VP of Sales for the Americas region. So excited to have Bob join us today. Thank you for being here, Bob.
Hey, thank you, Jackie. It's a pleasure to talk with your group. Very excited as well.
Okay, well, why don't we just get going in the interview? Bob, you and I have talked a couple of times, and, I'm always impressed with some of our leaders and their stories and how they got here. And so I just want to turn it over to you to ask you how you got your start in the electronic component industry and how you landed here as VP of Sales for the Americas for AVX.
All right. Thanks, Jackie. Well, I'm in my 36th year in the industry. I started way back in 1984 with Hamilton Avnet Electronics as a marketing trainee. And since that time, I spent about the first 15 years of my career on the distribution side of the business. And then I moved over to the OEM side. And currently, I have been with AVX for the last 8 years.
Well, that's awesome. I'm sure there's a lot of stories along the way, and we'll get into that. But I wanted to ask you, you mentioned you started at Hamilton, and what did it look like in those days? I remember back in the distribution days of so much training, and there was so much going on at that time for when you came in. We all got trained up maybe a little bit different than nowadays. So I just wanted to ask you that. What do you see versus when you first started the industry compared to now with training and development for new people coming in?
Well, certainly there have been a lot of changes since back in the 80s. And if you recall, at that time in the industry was very new for everyone. Frankly, they couldn't hire enough people fast enough in the industry. I was lucky enough to graduate in May of 1984 from college, and I remember very clearly to this day starting at Hamilton Avnet on June 3rd of 1984. And when I was hired as a marketing trainee. And what that entailed at that time was, in fact, there was a group of about 6 of us, and I was put in various roles for about a period of 3 months. Those roles were inside sales, product marketing, field sales, even spent a couple weeks in the warehouse picking and pulling parts. So it was certainly a more defined training program back then compared to probably a lot of things happening today. And I think that's one of the things in that time period. We've lost a lot of the training that's going on today. And I don't know if it's because of budget cuts or what have you, but it's more become you hire someone, you maybe give them a book, and you expect them a week later to be, rocking and rolling. So I'm sure every company is a little different, but that's one of the challenges I think we do have in the industry is some long-term patience with training. In fact, back in the 80s, funny story, when I joined Hamilton Avnet, there were probably about 20, 25 field salespeople hired by them. And when I would start meeting them and talking to them and asking about their backgrounds, believe it or not, there were a few people that were hired in from working at a bar. And how they got hired in was many of the people in the industry would be, frequenting this particular location. And the bartender would ask, "What do you guys do?" And next thing you know, give us your resume, and a few people were hired that way. So it's just kind of a funny, interesting story going back in the mid-'80s.
Wow. So that probably wouldn't happen nowadays. We have a lot stricter requirements, but I feel like as people come into the industry, you're right, we don't have a lot of training and development. That's part of what we're here to offer with Women in Electronics. But, it's interesting. You said you worked at the factory. I look back and I remember those days of going through, I don't know how many manufacturer floors and having to go through so much training. And at the time, I didn't appreciate it as much as I do now. I look back now and I think, oh my goodness, I'm so happy I had that sort of training. I don't know that we all get that anymore. But, when we look at now versus then as well, we try to think where we are as an industry, where we're going. And one of the other questions I have for you is women in the industry. So we're women in electronics. AVX is a proud supporter. Thank you so much, Bob, for your support of women in electronics. But I wanted to ask you, what does that look like too? What does the landscape of women versus men look like compared to when you started in the industry?
Yeah, back then I would say the women that were working in the industry, most of them had jobs either in inside sales, product management, or customer service. When you look at the field sales, again referencing my first company I worked for there, Hamilton Avnet, I would say there were probably about 10% of the field salespeople were women. Fast forward to today, and it certainly has changed. Especially in the field sales role. I think when I look at my rep network and our sales team that's out there, I would say it's probably closer to 40%. Okay, still has some runway to grow, but certainly has increased. Now at AVX, actually in my customer service today that report into me, we have about a ratio of 60% women, 40% men. When we look at moving up into the management ranges, directors, regionals, we're about 40% women and about 50% men. So it definitely has improved. And, quite frankly, we try to hire the best people capable of doing the job. Certainly we'd like to see more women apply for many of the jobs, whether it's entry level or middle management or even senior management. And I think that's one of the challenges that is out in the industry today.
Well, I think that's an excellent point. And really, that's amazing. Your decision-making, upper-level management positions, the women have a pretty high percentage. It's a lot of gender parity there. That doesn't match our industry. So congratulations to AVX, and I'm sure that's showing up in your profits as well. So hats off to you for that accomplishment. And really, as we're on this subject, what challenges do you think women face? Even if we have those higher percentages at AVX, what challenges do we still face in leadership positions as we're going up in the ranks in our careers? What is it that you notice?
Well, I think there's still that level of, what's been called the good old boy network. And to have a woman get into that network, I think is very challenging for all the women in the industry and in any industry for that matter. So I think that stigma still exists. Also, there is a perception, I think, that, people may feel having a woman in a senior management position, they may not be as strong as their male counterparts, which, personally, the women that I know in senior management positions are actually stronger than a lot of the male people in that grouping. So I think it's just the challenge is how do we get and promote those type of women into the higher levels? And one of the things I've also noticed is that, believe it or not, when you have a woman in that position and they may be managing other women, there's sometimes more of a conflict there. Okay. And, I don't know if it's a jealousy. I don't know if it's intimidation, but there's something there. And I think sometimes women block other women from moving up, to be quite, candid with you.
That is an excellent point, because one of our goals with women in electronics is to celebrate other women. So what you just described there is actually a very serious issue. It's very critical. It's something we don't talk about as much, but we have fewer people typically in those upper level management positions for women. And we do have a lot of blockers. So there is that jealousy, or maybe it's because there's not enough seats at the table. There's a lot of reasons for it, but I think it comes down to education. So programs like Women in Electronics to dig in deeper with companies and to look at the landscape and to do the education, because sometimes people don't even catch themselves, know that they're even doing that before they start to get the education. But I know you had another point on that.
Yeah, the only other thing I was going to mention is that, some of the things we try to do at AVX to, overcome some of these obstacles and barriers is that, well, first of all, the easiest thing is to promote from within and promote, a capable woman into a new role. Secondly, what I try to do is I try to highlight their achievements and contributions to the company so people can hear that and see, there's value not only in, a person being a woman, but, just in their overall contributions. And then the last thing is, we certainly feel that, giving and contributing and being part of different groups like Women in Electronics is a very positive step as well. And it shows that we're committed to helping and mentor people along the way.
And, I appreciate that, Bob, but I have a question for you with what you just said. Do you feel that male leaders need to advocate more to put a female in a leadership position?
Well, absolutely, especially if they're qualified. And I think, what happens, sometimes men feel threatened, okay? Because I can tell you, as I mentioned earlier, the women that I know, either in senior level positions or even middle management, are very strong women. They're some of our strongest performers. And so with that, we have to make sure that we are, promoting the right people accordingly. So we fully support that.
Well, I appreciate that. That's an excellent point. I appreciate the candid conversation. So leading into that, we talked about male leaders. You talked about the Gourdeau Boy Network. You talked about maybe there being some type of intimidation or something with a woman going into an upper level position that might be higher than them. And really the message would be to everybody in the industry, men and women, there's room for everyone, right? So it doesn't mean as women rise, men can't rise too, or that somehow the woman is taking their spot. So I think that the message is for the industry is men and women can rise together. Like it doesn't mean it has to be one or the other. But what other issues do you feel our male leaders face? Because I feel like our male leaders get stuck sometimes in this, they want to do the right thing, but sometimes they just don't know which way to step. So can you comment on that a little bit from your perspective?
Yeah, I think, sometimes, the male leaders, sometimes it's a reflection of the culture within the company. Okay. And they want to stay the course, and I'm not going to go off and do something that the company doesn't embrace. They don't want to take that risk. Whereas I think, you need to take that risk sometimes. And again, I think it shouldn't be male or female. It should be who best can contribute to the company and add value at the end of the day. I think if a male hires a female leader, and let's just say it doesn't work out for whatever reason, then it becomes a reflection maybe on that male leader, and could, hurt their career, long term. And the other thing, I think we would agree that sometimes women and men have different emotions and how they portray those emotions. Some men, quite frankly, can't deal with those type of different emotions and aren't strong enough or just don't know how to handle. So, they take the easy road and just not hire, right?
Right. I think it's such a good point too. So that's another topic, that emotional intelligence that we keep talking about at Women in Electronics, and super excited for our conference coming up to be talking about this as men and women together, because what you just hit on is so critical. And I believe it's true. I think it's avoiding conflict, not knowing how to deal with the emotions. Men tend to get a little more angry to show their emotions, and women tend to get a little more emotional. So it's a matter of everybody knowing their own emotional intelligence and being able to work with somebody else who looks different. So
absolutely. In fact, today, I will treat, the men and women differently in different situations because of those different emotions. Okay. So, not one approach fits all. So you have to be really cognizant of those different emotions.
Well, I appreciate that. I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done in this area. And then I'll ask you one more question. But Bob, before we started, I told you we might do a part 2 with you. So right now we're doing part 1, but we're going to end up doing part 2 because I have one more question for you today, but I have a lot more for the next session.
Sure.
Okay.
Love to.
So mentorship, that's the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because you have some really good advice with mentorship. And we have our industry-wide, now global mentorship program that connects the industry, because I'm very passionate about mentorship and I know it's helped so many people. So who are your mentors and what do you have to say about mentorship and what it means to a leader in their rising in their career journey?
Yeah, I think mentorship is extremely important. And I think it's even more so today in light of what I said earlier about the training that goes on. I think that I've always tried to be a mentor to not only my direct reports, but the people that report into them. Everyone knows I have a very open door policy, regardless of who you are. So I view that as a way to mentor, the people in my organization. Now, for me personally, over the years, I've had about 10 different managers, and I will say that, each one of them offered a various learning attribute that I've kept. Some weren't so good, but at the same time, you're learning something when they're not that great. So I can't think of anything that jumps out to me as a story that I could relate based on these managers. But I will say, in terms of really my first mentor, it was my dad. And I say that because, he taught me some very basic things, very fundamentals that I still think about, today. And that's, be patient, be respectful, never burn a bridge, and make sure you realize that relationships are first and the most important at the end of the day. And one story I will relate is back when I was in high school, my dad decided to run for school board. And he came up with these little cards with his picture on them that he could hand out to everyone so they'd vote for him. And he had 2 words on those cards, and it was, I care. And I've never forgotten that, because at the end of the day, I feel if you care, then people are going to, see that. It's going to rub off on people. And quite frankly, they're going to perform. And that's what a mentor is showing that you care at the end of the day. So I've always remembered that. That's a long time ago, but it certainly sticks with me today.
Well, Bob, I appreciate that so much and honor your father, who I know is not with us at this time. And I think that he left an amazing legacy. And I think it's very important for all the leaders to understand, and people listening, that that's one thing we have to leave is our legacy. So that I care message is what sticks with you. And that is the best message of a life, right? To leave that message that you cared. So for everyone listening, people are watching, even when you don't realize they're watching, whether you're a parent, whether you're a business leader, a mother, sister, whatever it might be, people are watching, and we all have an impact on each other's lives. So love that story about your dad, and would love to reconvene with you for part 2 to ask you some more questions about our industry and leadership. But I appreciate that you took the time today, Bob, with us. And any final thoughts before we sign off?
Well, I appreciate it as well, Jack, and I certainly look forward to having a further discussion. And I guess the last thing I would say is that, we as leaders, when you look at that word leaders, you see the word lead. I really look at it a little different, because at the end of the day, we certainly have to lead, but the way we need to lead is we need to serve the teams that we lead. And I'll just leave you with that thought. Love that thought. I will start with that thought when we reconvene for part 2. So thank you, Bob, for being here. Have a great day. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to another episode of Women in Electronics, right here in Orange County's only community radio station, octalkradio.net.